Good everybody. And so for today's parsha, the first thing I wanted to share with everybody is a teaching from the Noam Elimelech that relates to the Daf Yomi. And you're going to say, how is this Noam Elimelech relate to the Daf Yomi? So first of all, be patient, we'll get there. Also, I want to tell you that Rebbe Elimelech's Yortzeit is coming up on the 21st of Adar. We're planning something very, very special in our yeshiva. So what's going to happen is we're going to celebrate his Yortzeit with a special kumzitz. And also I'm going to make a siyum because by the Yortzeit, I'll have finished making a podcast on the entire Talmud. And it's a 7.5-year project. And it took me 7.5 years to do. Hashem gave me the strength to do it. Thank you, Hashem. And we had over 1.3 million downloads. So I'm very grateful. So on the Yortzeit, and we're going to make a siyum and a kumzitz. That'll be on the 21st of Adar. So in case you want to know what I'm going to be doing with the podcast, instead of doing a 5-minute podcast, I'm now doing a 1-minute daf on the YouTube. So you could subscribe to our YouTube channel, and then you'll see every day 1-minute daf and also many other divrei Torah on the YouTube. So the verse that Rebbe Elimelech talks about is the verse from our Torah portion, chapter 21, verses 18 through 20, 3 verses. The verse tells us, if 2 men are fighting, and one strikes his friend with a stone or with a fist, and he doesn't die right away, and he falls down on his bed. If he gets up, verse 19, if he gets up and he walks outside, al mishanto, on his stick, vinika, then the one who hit him shall be absolved. Rak shifto yitain, he has to just pay him the lost wages. Virapo yirapeh, and he shall heal him. Rebbe Elimelech is going to take this verse and take in a direction which isn't necessarily intuitive at first glance. So here's what Rebbe Elimelech does with it. First of all, before we get to Rebbe Elimelech, I have to give you the context of today's Daf Yomi. What is the Daf Yomi for today talk about? The Daf Yomi for today discusses the following case. The case of a woman who makes a vow that she's going to be a Nazirite. Unbeknownst to her, so a Nazirite is not allowed to drink wine or come in contact with a dead body or cut their hair. Unbeknownst to her, her husband annulled her vow. Our husband is allowed to do that. There's certain conditions, but he can annul her vow. So technically speaking, she's not a Nazirite, but she thinks she's a Nazirite. In that context, she says, well, I don't care that I'm a Nazirite. I'm going to go to the bar and have a drink of wine. So she goes to the bar and she thinks she's committing a sin. She goes to the bar, she thinks she's committing a sin by drinking some wine. But she's not technically committing a sin because really her husband has annulled her vow. So she doesn't get lashes. The Mishnah rules she doesn't get lashes, whereas Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah says she gets lashes rabbinically, but biblically she's not in violation. But the Talmud says that even though she doesn't get the punishment, the physical punishment, she requires atonement for her deeds. And when Rabbi Akiva would come to this verse, he used to cry. Rabbi Akiva would cry when he came to this verse. He said, somebody who intends to sin but doesn't actually sin, if they require atonement, how much more so somebody who actually sins, how much more so do they require atonement? Okay, so then the Gemara goes into a discussion about intentionality and sin. And the Gemara says, greater is somebody who does a sin with good intentions than somebody who actually does a mitzvah with no intention, or with bad intention or no intention. So and as an example of this, the today's Talmud lists two examples of people in the Bible who committed sins, but since they were doing it with good intentions, they are praised. The first is the example of Lot's daughters. That Lot's daughters were called righteous in today's Talmud because they intended to sin, but they were doing it for the right reason. They slept with their father, but that's because they thought they were the only people left on earth, and then they wanted to make sure the world didn't end. And another example of this that the Talmud brings is the example of Yael. She sleeps, even though she was a married woman, she sleeps with the enemy general Sisera in order to tire him out so that she could kill him. And these are people, and the Talmud praises her even more than the matriarchs of Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. So the Talmud says, do you really think they're greater than somebody who does a mitzvah without any intentionality? So therefore, the Talmud concludes that doing a mitzvah without intentionality, doing a mitzvah without intentionality without any intent is the equivalent of doing a sin with the wrong intent. It's the equivalent, meaning to say it's a good thing. They're both good things. And the Talmud gives but it's not as good as doing a mitzvah with the right intentionality. That's the highest level. But the phrase of the Talmud is that it's better to do a mitzvah shelo lishma, mitol shelo lishma bo lishma. That you're better off to do a mitzvah without the proper intent, because by doing it without the proper intent, you'll eventually come to do it with the right intent. Now, all this is the background. So, for what Rabbi Elimelech says in today's Torah portion, comes along Rabbi Elimelech, and Rabbi Elimelech says, what do we do with this verse that we just cited? What is the verse? That the two men are fighting. Rabbi Elimelech says, no. Now, I know if those of you who want to say the literal approach, Rabbi Elimelech is not giving a literal approach. He is giving an approach that is Hasidic. And in fact, he explains here that this is an approach of personal improvement. He says, what does it mean when the men are fighting? He says this doesn't refer to two random men. This refers to the two men inside of us, the two inclinations inside of us. We have inside of us a Yetzer Hara, and we have inside of us a Yetzer Tov. That Hashem has given us two netios in life, two inclinations. One is the inclination towards doing the wrong thing, and one is the inclination towards doing the right thing. And each is sometimes called, in the Torah, each is sometimes called an ish, a man. And the passage that he cites for this is that if the Yetzer Hara prevails, if the evil inclination prevails, it's called a man. And his source for this is that the Gemara in Sukkah cites a story of the parable that Natan the prophet gives to David after he sinned with Bathsheba. That the Yetzer Hara is first called, this evil inclination is first called a traveler, and then is called a guest, and finally it's called a man. That if you continue to sin, the Yetzer Hara is given enough strength that he's called a man. It really dominates you. It's taken over a personality. So, but Rabbi Elimelech takes us in a different direction, which we weren't expecting. He says, ideally, we must serve Hashem with both inclinations. There's a very, very deep idea, Hasidic idea. We have to take our evil inclination and turn it for good. Like, let's say our ideas, our qualities that will sometimes lead us in the wrong direction, we have to turn them for good. With examples of this, like our desire for wealth, use it for good, to achieve the wealth, to do good in the world, or our desire for passion, use it for the passion for Torah. As it says, b'chol avavcha, you have to serve Hashem b'chol avavchem, with all your hearts, and this means the Gemara in Brachos tells us with both your good and with your evil inclinations. So says Rabbi Elimelech, this is what it means when it says in the verse, when the two men are quarreling, meaning to say that if you feel this quarrel inside yourself, you feel this quarrel to do good or to do evil, then what are you supposed to do? And then what happens? The next verse says, Vihika ish esrei ehu. And then the man strikes his friend. What does this mean? And so since that refers to the man, refers to the Yetzer Tov, the inclination for good, and the Yetzer Hara is called his friend. Why is the evil inclination called our friend? Meaning to say, because once the good, the desire for good overcomes the desire for bad, once we're able to channel the desire for bad and use it to serve Hashem, then the evil inclination, we're able to use these negative qualities and make them our friend. That's the ideal in life, to take our negative traits and turn them into positive. So then this negative trait becomes our friend. Basically, everybody has these negative traits and our weaknesses, and the idea is to turn our weaknesses into our friend. So again, how is he reading this? If the two men are fighting, these two things inside of us are fighting, and the man strikes his friend, meaning to say the good inclination overcomes the evil inclination and turns the evil inclination, our weakness, into our friend. So then that's what's done. The inclination for good has to turn the evil inclination into our friend. But how do you do this? How do we turn our weaknesses into our strength? How do we turn our evil inclination into our friend? Rabbi Elimelech tells us, what is the next word? How do you do it? You do this with your stone or with your fist. With a stone or with your fist. Well, what's a stone or with your fist? What is that? So says Rabbi Elimelech, how does the Yetzer Tov, how does the inclination for good subdue the Yetzer Hara? With a stone, with an Evan. What's a stone? A stone? A stone is Torah. A stone is Torah because the letters of the Torah are called stones. And this is based upon the Sefer Yetzirah, which is a very early proto-Kabbalistic work. Sefer Yetzirah tells us that the letters of the Torah are called stones. So how do we weaken the evil inclination? How do we weaken the Yetzer Hara? Through Torah study. Through Torah study, we're able to weaken the evil inclination. And this is what it means when we just said our Gemara, and now he comes back to our Daf Yomi, that it's mutav Torah shelo lishma, that it's better to study Torah even though it is not with the right intent, because mitol shelo lishma, bo lishma, because by studying it without the right intent, you'll eventually come to study with the right intent, meaning to say as follows. This is how Rabbi Elimelech takes that phrase and makes it relevant for his Hasidim. This is what he says. He says, Torah learning, when we study Torah, it should ideally be done lishma. What does lishma mean? For the sake of the name of Hey, meaning to say, this refers to the last letter Hey in the four-letter name of God. It's a Yud, and then a Hey, and then a Vav, and then the last letter is also a Hey. So one should ideally study Torah only with the purpose of reuniting the name of God. This is the Kabbalistic idea that the name of God is separated in the world. There's division in the world, and it's our idea to unite everything. It's the idea of Torah is to unite everything, bring everybody together. However, says Rabbi Elimelech, if you see that you cannot do that. You don't think that you're able to study Torah with that intent and with that goal. You're not able to bring everybody together. Then, if that's the case, then you have to learn Torah to help you overcome your Yetzer Hara. So the ideal way is to study Torah with the purpose of uniting Hashem's name. But if you're not able to do that, then at least we have to learn Torah for the purpose of overcoming the Yetzer Hara. And then once we've overcome this evil inclination, then we can learn for the sake of reuniting the name. And this is the idea, says Rabbi Elimelech, that if this menuvel, if this despicable entity, the Yetzer Hara, is attacking you, if the Yetzer Hara is attacking you, drag him to the base medrash, because only through Torah study can we defeat this evil inclination. So let me just pause here for a moment and recap what we said, because there's a lot of very deep ideas here. Just want to make sure we haven't lost anybody in what Rabbi Elimelech is saying. We're just halfway through his piece, but I want to make sure everybody's is understanding it. It says in the verse, it seems like an innocuous civil code and nothing to do with the evil inclination. I see your question. Just let me make his point. And so it seems like an innocuous civil code. If the two men are fighting and one man strikes his friend with a stone. So Rabbi Elimelech says this refers to two men are fighting. This refers to inside yourself, that there are two entities pushing you in opposite directions, the inclination for good and the inclination for bad. And how is it? And what's the goal? The goal is to take the inclination for good and have it subdue the inclination for bad, not to destroy it, but to change it so that we turn our weakness into our strength. And how do we do that? With an even. And the even, a stone, that represents the Torah. And this is the concept of the idea that even if we study Torah, if it's not for the right intent, we'll eventually come to study for the right intent. What is Torah for that's not for the right intent? That doesn't mean I'll study Torah with the purpose. So I'll come to the Torah class so that I can get pizza. No, that's like the rabbi gives up pizza. No, that's not that. He doesn't even think is not the right intent. The Torah study not for the right intent is to overcome our own personal weaknesses. And if we do that, if we study Torah for that reason, then eventually we'll come to study Torah for the purpose of uniting the name of God. And when we unite the name of God, we're bringing redemption to the world, a much deeper point. And then he says, I know that people have questions, but let me just finish his piece, because then he says that it starts off, and this is what we discussed at the beginning of our last Torah session, our last Torah study session, that it says in the verse, if in Pasuk Hey, what did it say in Pasuk Hey? Let's go back a little bit to Pasuk Hey. It says, if when it's time for the slave to go free, the Hebrew slave says, I don't want to go free. I love my wife, my master, and my master, my wife, and my children. I don't want to go free. So what does it mean? I love my master. So this hints to the fact, who is this referring to? It's not referring to a regular Hebrew slave. This refers to somebody who's a servant of Hashem, somebody who's an eved of Hashem, a servant of God. And he says, I love my master. I love Hashem Yisparach, but I also love my wife. I can't go free from this world. I love this world. I love Hashem, but I also love this world, meaning to say I love Torah Shalom. I love Hashem, but I also like this world. So what do? He says, this love of the physical world is holding me back from reaching my potential. So what does he need to do? Then what should his master do under those circumstances? It says literally the master brings him to the Elohim, which we said was a judge, and then he should bring him to the door. But Rabbi Elimelech says, no, what does it mean? He should toil in Torah. He should study Torah, because the word dalah is called poor. And so basically he should study, that's the same word as delis. So therefore he should study Torah with Hashem, with the divine presence in exile. And his master shall bore him through the ear with this all. He shall attach him to himself, be completely attached to Hashem. And so now that's the idea. He says what this verse is talking about is somebody who wants to be a real servant of God forever has to bore it through his ear, really listen very carefully, listen very closely. Now we go back to the first pasuk. What does it mean with an Evan Obey Grove? If the two men are fighting and he strikes his friend with a stone or a fist, this connotes, what does it mean? That people who fight with their fists, meaning to say, if we really want to overcome the Yetzer Hara, we need to go out full force. We can't do it halfway. We have to strengthen ourselves with good character traits so that we'll be able to overpower the Yetzer Hara. So basically, that we have to really defeat this Yetzer Hara with full strength, with full force. And so that is what it's saying. And Rabbi Elimelech goes on, but I think we're getting the gist of it. So let me pause here. I see that people have some questions, And let me pause here. Hold on.